All right, so yesterday we talked about Joe Manchin turning himself into an absolute mob boss when a reporter had the audacity to question him on his blatant and open conflicts of interest, specifically that coal plant that he profits hundreds of thousands of dollars a year from, as he is continuing to try to water down the climate portions of this $3.5 trillion bill that is still being negotiated. And now we have Joe Manchin adventuring out on an entirely new arc as he has turned himself into an absolute comic book villain while he is standing on his yacht and screaming down to the peasants in West Virginia. Okay, so basically Joe Manchin was confronted by a bunch of West Virginian constituents who are pretty pissed off about how he has been handling this negotiation process with this $3.5 trillion bill. So without further ado, let's go ahead and check in on what this absolute ghoul from West Virginia has to say to these people.
Let me talk if you can. Where are y'all from? Anybody from West Virginia? We have any West Virginians?
We have a lot of West Virginians.
God bless you all. But gang, we're working hard. We really are. We're going to continue to in good faith. We want to get a good bill that's a balanced bill, that's well done.
By balanced bill, by the way, what he means is balanced between what the overwhelming majority of the American people want and what his corporate donors want. That's really what he's saying there, but continue on.
And I know it won't be enough for some, and it'll be too much for others. In West Virginia...
Too much for others? What the fuck are you talking about, my guy? What too much child care? We're gonna get too much free community college? Too much low prescription drug prices? What the fuck are you talking about? Too much for goddamn who? I mean, he's just completely making this up.
You know, West Virginia's a little bit different than it used to be.
There's a lot of poverty. What are you gonna do for the poor in West Virginia?
We're gonna be working everything we can to create good opportunities.
And we need to tax the rich.
Well, I agree with that. I definitely agree. That's the one number thing we should be doing is fixing the tax code so everybody pays their fair share. We should be also negotiating for lower drug prices. We should be doing all these things.
They need that. Hold pharma accountable.
I agree with you 1,000%. We're all on the same page, gang. We really are.
Have we expanded Medicare? Adding dental, vision, and hearing coverage to Medicare, that's a real opportunity that we can do.
Well, we have, here, let me just explain on that one. We will get to that eventually, but right now we can't even take care of it. It's going to go broke in 2026. Let us fix and repair that first.
That's not true. Tax the rich.
We're taxing the rich. I agree. We're going to make the rich and the famous pay.
But how much are they going to pay? They can cover this. You can cover 9,000%, not in 26. So when you think about it, you know, we just passed a Pentagon budget of $788 billion.
About every year.
No, and that over 10 years is $6 trillion, right? $6 trillion. And we're talking about...
How much do you think that we spend every year on non-discretionary, basically non-defense? Just as much.
Clearly not enough.
Do you know we pay? Let me just give you all
But
this.
I'm just saying we can afford, if we can
I know,
afford
let me
this.
just tell you, let me give you one little bit of information, okay? So,
Wait, I got one little bit of information for you. The Republicans are likely to take over
that's a
the
shame,
Senate.
because if all this
We
is
don't. This is
popular,
like
we should
this is
win
our
everything.
one
But you're
chance
not gonna
right
deliver
now
if
to
we don't
pass
deliver.
the
Do you think they won't
legislation.
repeal it? If we don't do it right, do you think they won't repeal it as soon as they take over? If,
If you don't pass this, we're gonna
Yeah,
lose the
they're not
midterms.
going to pass things like this for the people. They're not.
Let me
This
give
is
you
our
this. We
chance.
spent- we-
All right, so that's basically the end of it. I mean, listen, there were a lot of good points, okay? These people who showed up to Joe Manchin's yacht, they had their talking points ready to go, and they did a fantastic job. So all credit to these people for actually showing up and bullying Joe Manchin a little bit, okay? It's entirely a great thing to go and bully politicians. We should be holding them accountable, and people like Joe Manchin, especially these massively corporate ghouls, these people should not get a single moment of peace alone as they are trying to do things like he is trying to do, tanking this bill. But some of the best points that they were making there at the end, obviously, you guys are going to lose to Republicans in 2022 if you tank this bill, right? That's pretty obvious. Joe Manchin doesn't necessarily care because he effectively is a Republican, okay? He says this himself. In addition to that, they made a number of other good points, right? They were pointing out, we just passed and Joe Manchin has passed this as well if we want to talk about the last number of years, right? Joe Manchin has voted for $9.1 trillion on defense, okay? $9.1 trillion on defense over the last decade, and he's whining about $3.5 trillion over the next decade in an investment for the American people. So and he also pointed out there, which I thought was absolutely hilarious, okay? If you look relative to what other countries spend on their military budgets versus what they spend on welfare, he said, right, when they bring up these statistics of us spending $778 billion a year on our military budget, his response was basically, well, we're spending almost the same amount on all these other programs like Medicare and Medicaid, right? Investments in the people, right? And they're going to go broke by 2026, which is a completely fabricated nonsense talking point, okay? They're not going to go broke. We can absolutely fund these programs. But his comparison there was to say, oh, well, we spend almost as much on Medicaid and Medicare as we are on the military. That's not a good proportion. You should not be spending as much on giving handouts to defense contractors, essentially, as you are on healthcare and education and other non-discretionary portions of the budget. That's completely ridiculous. What kind of fucking country, name me a single other country on earth that is a large developed nation that is spending that proportion of their budget on the military? It doesn't exist, because the United States spends more than the next 10, 13 countries combined on our military, and we're doing it in completely inefficient ways, to the point where the Pentagon cannot even pass an audit to tell us where any of this money is even going, okay? So it's completely ridiculous for somebody like Joe Manchin to pretend to be fiscally responsible while simultaneously handing out trillions of dollars to defense contractors who are entirely unaccountable in this entire process. So it's just completely ridiculous. But there are a number of other good points that they were pointing out there. They said tax the rich, right? Joe Manchin sitting up there and saying, well, I don't think we can afford this because we can't afford to raise the deficit or raise the debt, right? And these people pointed out, tax the fucking rich, right? And Joe Manchin had the audacity to turn around and lie straight to these people's faces and say, oh, well, I agree with you. And you see how he pandered, right? I'm not going to go back and pull up this specific clip, but you saw how he pandered, right? In that portion of the clip where he goes, well, we're going to tax the rich and all the famous people, right? And he's trying to just give like a talking point. He's virtue signaling, right? When we know what the actual reality is, okay? This was Joe Manchin just weeks ago, okay? He was saying this, and he was saying it all the way back in April, but he's been saying this consistently. Manchin warns Biden's infrastructure bill is in trouble over the corporate tax hikes. Interesting from a guy who just said that he supported taxing the rich. Let's read this. So Senator Joe Manchin, an influential centrist Democrat, really he's a far-right extremist, but he warned on Monday that the Biden administration's massive infrastructure package can't pass in its current form because he and a handful of other Senate Democrats believe the corporate tax hikes proposed in the bill designed to offset its costs are too steep. Okay, so this guy who literally was opposed to raising taxes on the wealthiest corporations in the country, even back to the pre-Trump days, okay? He doesn't even want to undo the 2017 Trump tax cuts, which blew up the debt and the deficit, okay? So he doesn't even want to fully undo that while he's simultaneously complaining about the debt and the deficit. This is a complete contradiction, right? At face value, it's completely ridiculous. And on top of that, he was straight up lying to them and saying that he supports taxing the rich. He doesn't. He supports, at least in part, the Trump tax cuts, okay? He doesn't even support the tax code under Obama, which feeds into another complete nonsense talking point that Manchin has said, which he's basically saying, if we go back to the pre-Trump tax rates on these corporations and on individuals, then we're going to be non-competitive in the global marketplace. I'm sorry, was the United States non-competitive under the Obama administration? What the fuck is he even talking about? He's just making it up as he goes along because he's entirely corrupted, and we know this, right? Here from the Daily Poster, just a reminder on some of the things that he has supported in the past, right? As he is coming out and railing against an entitlement mentality, this is the type of shit that he actually supports. So Manchin demanded a bank bailout before slamming entitlement mentality. So this is interesting. On Thursday, coal baron turned Senator Joe Manchin threatened to kill his party's climate, healthcare, and anti-poverty legislation, telling reporters, quote, I cannot accept our economy, basically our society, moving towards an entitlement mentality. But Manchin's declaration comes almost exactly 13 years after he played a pivotal role in pushing for a massive Wall Street bailout that funneled hundreds of billions of dollars of public money to the banks whose financial crisis destroyed the global economy and ravaged West Virginia with mass foreclosures, okay? He does not give a single goddamn shit about conservative voters within West Virginia, okay? The people who have been screwed over by these gigantic financial institutions that he was perfectly willing to give entitlements to. But the second that it comes to lowering prescription drug prices, and just a reminder, Joe Manchin's daughter was caught up in a price fixing scheme that was likely criminal. Okay, so she was price gouging Americans to the tune of millions of dollars being stuffed into her own pocket while raising the price of EpiPens, which is a life-saving medication, and price gouging the American people for that life-saving medication. So of course he doesn't want to lower prescription drug prices, right? But we know the reality here is, right? He doesn't care about the debt and the deficit because he's perfectly willing to give entitlements to the richest and wealthiest corporations and individuals in the country, right? He wants to keep their taxes low. He wants to give them bailouts whenever they want it. But when it comes to helping the American people, suddenly he's nowhere to be found. And suddenly, oh, it's entitlements and it's the debt and the deficit. It's complete horseshit, okay? But we've known this for a long time. And just a reminder, West Virginia is in the mainland United States, the fifth poorest or sixth poorest state in the entire country, okay? It goes Mississippi, Louisiana, New Mexico, Kentucky, Arkansas, West Virginia, and then Alabama, Oklahoma, Tennessee. Notice anything familiar here? All led by conservatives, okay? Except for maybe New Mexico kind of flips back and forth sometimes, but all the rest of these are led by conservatives. Why? Because this idea of trickle-down economics, of giving tax cuts to the corporations and the billionaires, this idea of Reaganomics, where that money will eventually trickle down, and as Joe Manchin was saying in that video, oh, we're just going to give people better opportunities, right? What that translates into is this. It translates into poverty, okay? This is the situation that West Virginian people are facing, and that's why they're willing to show up in their fucking kayaks to go confront their millionaire coal baron fucking senator in West Virginia, who's sitting on his yacht and has the audacity to be looking down on them and saying, sorry, I'm not going to lower your prescription drug prices. I'm not going to tax the rich. I'm not going to give you free community college. I'm not going to do any of the things that would actually materially improve your lives. But don't worry, the next time that a gigantic military budget comes around, the next time that a tax cut that Republicans are trying to shove through comes around, I am going to be all for it, and I won't mention a single goddamn time the debt or the deficit or entitlements in any way, shape, or form. So this is a giant hypocrisy of our political system here in the United States, okay? This has been the case for decades. Under Democrats, under Republicans, it's always the same. They bring out these same old tired talking points whenever it is legislation to help the American people. But if it's legislation to help defense contractors, if it's legislation to help corporations and billionaires, then suddenly nobody mentions these talking points. So that's how you know they're basically completely full of shit. And just a reminder, this is what Joe Manchin is opposing, right? Child tax benefit, universal pre-K, paid family leave, paid medical leave, free community college, Medicare expansion, housing, home care, climate, higher taxes on the rich, all popular, as Kyle Kalinske points out here, and a group of corrupt corporatists is trying to sink it. One of those corporatists would be Joe Manchin. So listen, we got a new comic book villain arc here from Joe Manchin, standing up on his yacht, talking down to the peasants as he tells them that no, they can't have affordable prescription drug prices, no, they can't have free community college, no, they can't have universal pre-K or climate legislation or housing or home care or any of those things, because Joe Manchin is an entirely corrupted ghoul who nobody should be taking seriously. And we did have a little bit of drama play out last night in terms of this $3.5 trillion bill. It's still unsure where it's going to be going, but if progressives are actually going to stick to their guns, that would be the preferable path, right? It is more preferable for us to tank both of these bills and to revisit them in the future than it is to let somebody like Joe Manchin water them down for his corporate buddies.